Everybody dies, but not everybody truly lives. 6 years ago, when I was 12, I was fascinated by magic and loved doing card tricks, spending hours perfecting each one in front of the mirror. One summer, my family took me on holiday to Sydney, where I was excited to visit a tiny, quirky magic shop. There, the owner of the shop showed me a 3-minute video called "It All Goes Back in the Box." This video changed my entire perspective of life and left me with so many unanswered questions, some which I still have to this day. The video used the game Monopoly as a metaphor for life and portrayed the average person endlessly chasing promotions and material possessions whilst doing something they did not enjoy. The video ended with this simple 2-word message: what matters? This really made me think about what mattered in my own life, even at such a young age, and really helped cement what I wanted to be doing at that time, which was perfecting my magic tricks, doing the Rubik's Cube, playing table tennis with my friends, and skateboarding. These activities are what mattered and brought me most meaning at that point in time. Of course, these have changed over the years, and I've revisited this video on many occasions, and each time coming back to my life with more clarity of remembering what matters. My Greenstone, like many, has shifted and morphed, evolving from the original topic of COVID into bigger topics about life and death. I initially wanted to focus on how nonsensical the varying government responses to COVID were around the globe. I explored almost every aspect, investigating behind the scenes and going down many rabbit holes. And I kept coming up against insane levels of control and censorship of information. The most puzzling part of my experience and research through COVID was witnessing the loss of common sense and seeing how fear controlled the majority. And whilst there were many positive things to come out of this pandemic, the research also showed a disturbing rise in suicide and mental health issues, especially among the young people. According to researchers from Boston College, depression and anxiety increased an insane 600% across America alone during the first 9 months of the pandemic. With no doubt, this has led to the recent increase in youth suicide, as reported by many agencies around the world. I could have easily been one of these stats. Imagine, at the start of grade 10, being excited to move from the mundane existence of high school in Australia, where you're caught in a cycle of monotony, back to Bali, and complete your high school years at the green school that you had loved so much when you attended in primary. But just 2 months after relocating your entire life, COVID becomes a global threat, and you're forced to move back to Australia, along with all of your exciting plans. Well, this is what happened to me, and my life suddenly looked nothing like I had anticipated. The expectation of green school had faded into an even worse monotony of online school, confined to my room, having to drag myself out of bed each morning for those online classes. I felt like I was living on autopilot. I let these external circumstances impact how I live my life, and quickly I began to spiral into a depressive state. Like I know many other people felt, maybe even you experienced during this time. But how did I get myself out of this state? Believe it or not, one afternoon, I stumbled across that same video from the magic shop all those years ago and was reminded again of that simple message: what matters? This made me reassess what I was doing at that time, and through this reflection, I discovered a love for video editing. Seeing how adding music to images can really bring them to life and tell a whole story, whilst eliciting an emotional feeling in the viewer. Being a very meticulous and pedantic person, the act of editing was satisfying and therapeutic for me. It felt purposeful and became what mattered most at that point. It allowed me to not be so consumed by the parts of my life that I couldn't control. And since I love editing so much, for my project this year, I decided to create a short film to explore my many questions I have about the world. Through the film, I also wanted to provide the viewer with the opportunity to have the same feelings I had from that video all those years ago in that magic shop. Towards the end of the year, my perspective expanded, and rather than making my film exclusively about COVID, I found myself exploring broader concepts to try and find the answers I was looking for. I've always been a very curious child, with many questions, I'm sure annoying my parents at times, like incessantly needing to know what was for breakfast, for dinner, before I'd even had my breakfast. Things needed to make sense for me, and I like definitive answers. So when COVID first came along, I was bamboozled by many things. And with no definitive answers to be had, I broadened my perspective beyond my then current way of thinking and looked inward, questioning my internal thoughts instead of my external environment. And this gave me direction for my film. Exploring these questions brought me back again to the topic of meaning and purpose, a topic which has become so important for me because of what I experienced during COVID and at various other times in my teenage life, where I felt lost, anxious, and sometimes even a little depressed. And I know many other people have these same feelings. I also know many people think about existential things, despite not being a very common conversation topic, or even awkward to talk about. And this is the reason I decided to create a film. With these concepts being hard to articulate, sometimes with the words not even existing in the English language to express how one feels, a film is a perfect way to give voice to these tricky concepts. They say an image speaks more than 1,000 words, so a film must speak millions. In my film, I express concepts about fear, death, meaning, and wonder, exploring the possibility of turning fear into awe by connecting to what really matters. This, of course, is different for each of us. But imagine a world where everyone was doing what mattered most to them. It's no coincidence that this video, which so heavily impacted my life, began in a magic shop. Because as I discovered, finding out what really matters to each of us is what brings the real magic into our lives. Let me ask you a question. What brings you the most meaning and magic into your life? The audience I had in mind when creating this film was people who are looking for more and trying to make sense out of their life. Maybe they are looking for their own magic, just like I was. So without further ado, I'd like to show you share the short film that I created, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Meaning comes in many different forms and is unique to each of us. Lots of meaningful days, full of the things that matter most to you, bring fulfillment, enjoyment, and inspiration, adding up to a meaningful life. This allows you to feel like you really matter. Thank you everyone so much for watching and listening. I really hope you enjoyed.